This time around, we collaborated with ADA and Securemetric to discuss about managing risk in digital financing. As you all know, the financial institutions' effort to comply with regulations has led to several changes in risk management practices. Okay, so we meet with the speakers. First, we have Mr. Keith Lee from ADA. Hi, Mr. Keith. How are you?
Very good morning. Thank you so much.
Morning. Yeah, and then we have Miss Angie So from Innovative. She is our colleague. She is Regional BD Manager.
Hello, hi Alvi, good morning.
Hi, good morning. And then we have Mr. Muhammad Hassan Ali from Securemetric. He is a Senior Pre-Sales and Technical Consultant. Hi, Mr. Hassan, how are you? Okay, without further ado, we talk about the agenda. First, opening remarks. I'm LV, your host for today, and then I will pass the floor to Mr. Keith for his talk about navigating this digital transformation in the financing industry through alternative solution. And then we have a Q&A session for that talk, and then we move to Angie with adopting EKYC to mitigate risk in digital finance, and then we have Q&A, and then we move to Mr. Hassan with elevate efficiency and strengthen security by digital your signing procedure, and then we have Q&A, and then the end of session. Without further ado, I pass the floor to Mr. Keith.
Thank you so much, Alvi, for the quick walkthrough. Once again, very good morning to everyone. We're very glad to have you here. I'm very privileged to be able to speak alongside my comrades from Innovative as well as Securemetric. So before I go into my presentation today, I'd just like to give a quick introduction about ADA. So we are actually an entity owned under Axiata Digital. So we currently deem ourselves as probably the largest outcome-based data AI company in the region. And currently we house about 600 over data scientists, digital media gurus, industry experts, as well as management consultants like myself. We are currently operating across 9 markets throughout Southeast Asia and the South Asian market. So I would like to probably take you through some of our thoughts today in terms of what's happening in the industry. And we all know that the COVID-19 situation has become like a hot topic, although we are thankfully at the end of the journey, and hopefully we'll get back to our normal lives as soon as possible. But I'd like to just share with you today some of the observations that we have that's impacting the financial services industry. If you may go to the next slide. So I would like to start off with some industry observations. So when we look at what's happening in the industry right now, I think we are undergoing some sort of financial industry transformation, where globally we're looking at the greater mission that is being imposed by the global FS regulators to look at financial inclusiveness. With this, we look at potentially how to actually grant access to credit services or financial services for the unbanked, underbanked, as well as unbankables. But at the same time, I think there's also a simultaneous challenge that's being faced by the industry. So while being able to confer financial access for this group of potential customers, we're also talking about the need to strike a balance, to make sure that there's a due process in place to ensure that we are granting credits to creditworthy individuals. If you may go to the next slide. And then we have what we call the black swan effect that's happening sometime late 2019. When we look at what's happening with COVID-19, it's kind of creating a ripple effect across all industries, not just the financial services. But specifically for the financial services industry, we're looking at several ratios or several key performance metrics and kind of dive into how it has subsequently impacted the performance of the banking sector. So if you look at just the APAC region as a whole, generally speaking, what's happening with COVID has seemed to be impacting the performance of the banks in terms of non-performing assets and also the consequent credit losses, which could have been raised up to 600 billion. And because of this, that also coupled with the economic uncertainties, like we're looking at a oil price shock and a market volatility. So this has become a kind of a challenging environment for the financial institutions to be able to strike through these difficult times. You may go to the next slide. And then there's this huge opportunity that we observe. If you look at the total population in ASEAN alone, we're looking at potentially up to 438 million unbanked individuals. And that may potentially transform to a boost of up to 6% increment in terms of GDP, as well as a 3 times economic contribution by 2030, if we are able to find an effective way to tackle or to serve this group of unbanked individuals by granting financial access. Next slide, please. And then we look at the domestic scenario. As far as Malaysia is concerned, our view is that the country is currently facing a crossroad, and this is primarily due to 3 main factors that we're observing. So first of all, I think when it comes to credit, granting credit access, it's becoming like a norm in the country where the natural mechanisms that we typically use with conventional credit rating systems that's being provided by the agencies. But at the same time, I think due to the transformation that's happening globally and subsequently creating a ripple effect to the domestic market, is that where because of the COVID-19 situation and whatnot, we're looking at more a greater need to actually onboard customers via the digital channel. So in that context, when we look at the available mechanisms that's out there in the market today, we're looking at the traditional credit rating mechanisms, as well as the typical KYC processes that the credit applicants would usually need to go through. We are looking at a crossroad where there's going to be a need to transform the entire process. And while at the same time, we are also looking at how do we actually meet the regulatory aspirations. As we all know, Bank Negara is currently looking at the potential conferment of digital banking license. So with the transformation of the operational process, the need to actually enable digital onboarding becomes a greater importance than before. Next slide, please. And then we will dive into some of the factors that I just shared. I think if you look at the way the conventional credit ratings are being performed, you would actually observe that a lot of this mechanism or parameters being used are heavily financial skewed, right? If you look at the historical payment history, the number of credits or the volume of credits that individual is currently obtaining. So the question now here lies where, suppose if the individual does not have any sort of credit history, how do we then come up with a more equitable way of assessing the creditworthiness of the individuals? And I think that also coupled with a series of other factors, like there could be psychometric assessment of a particular individual beyond their financial usage behavior. Next slide, please. And then we look at the greater need to onboard customers via the digital channels. And at the same time, we are also observing a great gradual fall in terms of branch visits. So with the lack of branch visit, that KYC process then becomes a greater challenge, right? Especially during the lockdown period, where financial applications becomes a challenge due to the inability to be able to access physical documentations. And then there's also a greater need as a result to apply AI and machine learning techniques to be able to help bridge the gaps by conducting activities such as fraud assessment and kind of shorten the process to the digital onboarding process. Next slide, please. And while we're looking at the conferment of the up to 5 potential digital banking licenses, we are also looking at the other side of the equation, right? How do the FSI be able to meet the aspiration while still being able to maintain the AML and CFT requirements. Because through the significantly different channel, you're looking at different technologies, different techniques, different credit evaluation methods to be imposed to be able to better manage the risk moving forward. Next slide, please. So the way ADA looks at the market scenario, we look at a potential avenue for us to meet the gaps that's happening in the market right now. One of which is where we look at a potential ability to utilize digital data or alternative data sources such as telco, utility data, to be able to bridge the gap and formulate a more complete picture of a particular individual's creditworthiness. So this may include a series of new data sets such as psychographic behavior, mobility information that helps us make better decision when it comes to approving a credit. And with the growing importance of digital onboarding, we also realize that there's a greater need for any sort of a futuristic credit assessment tool to be as efficient as possible. So we're talking about speed and efficient operational efficiency, being able to turn around a result at speed, right? So that is also another important factor that we look at to be able to maneuver the transformation in digital banking moving forward. And I think the third element that is increasingly important is where we need to ensure that whatever data fit creates sustainability moving forward. Again, if I relate back to the COVID-19 situation, the lockdown, I think we are also observing a vacuum of up to 6 months of repayment information within the traditional credit rating ecosystem. So how do we actually bridge the gap by being able to assess alternative ways, alternative data that creates a constant feed of how an individual evolves when it comes to credit behavior? And what we observe here is by being able to tap into telco data, because these days everyone possesses a mobile phone, right? Everyone spends probably most part of their life on their mobile devices. So this is, I think, is a good way for us to be able to continuously track how a person's credit behavior evolves moving forward. Next slide, please. And the logic here is fairly simple. It's not a rocket science. So what we've done at ADA is we have actually been working with our telco partners to be able to harness a series of, I would say, critical data sets that has a bearing on a particular individual's credit history, and kind of bundle that with different buckets of data categories, such as the mobile apps they've been using, the mobility information through the GPS, the telco usage, etc. And of course, most importantly, the repayment history of their bills, the frequency of their default on the bill repayments, etc. To kind of harmonize this into our proprietary credit scoring engine. And through this credit scoring engine, we realized that there's a possibility for us to also open up other potential features that may benefit the financial service institutions. We talk about potential fraud validation capabilities because of the mobility information that we're capturing, that we can actually create an additional layer of validation by understanding better the claim residential and working address, for example. The credit score is something that we deem to be complementary. With all due respect, we know that there's a robust system in the market right now. But what we're looking at is a potential enhancement to the traditional credit rating mechanisms by being able to harness that with our alternative credit score. And I think through the telco, and this is going to be something that's even more interesting for the banking and financial institutions, where through the subscription, we are able to harness a series of profiling data of the customers. For example, their social circle, the frequency of their travel, for example, just to make sure that we are able to create the additional dimension of the particular customers. And that in the longer run, we feel that it's going to be beneficial for the banks for any sort of a retargeting initiative. Next slide, please. So just to sum up, I think the reason why we want to further explore the possibilities of using alternative credit scoring to enhance the overall financial service market is where we deem this to be an opportunity for us to be able to enlarge the credit providers market space because they are potentially unbanked, underbanked, or unbankable segments that we may potentially tackle using an alternative solution like this. And because of that, there is absolutely no credit history required for us to derive any sort of assessment on a particular credit applicant. And then we also look at the potential, the opportunity to actually reduce the rejection rate of potentially good paymaster. They are, based on observation, is quite substantial pool of customers who do not actually comply with the traditional credit rating mechanisms. And this may be acting as a second chance for such group of customers. And I think most importantly, because we're talking about telco as well as the banking financial service sector, it's going to be a highly regulated environment. And just to give the greater assurance, I think the mechanisms that we are building at the moment will be fully data compliant. All the PIIs, the personally identifiable information, will be fully secure within the telco environment. So with that, I shall close my presentation today. Next slide, if you may go to the next slide. So we're happy to talk to you more about the offering that ADA has in mind, specifically for this use case. And with that, I shall close my presentation, and thank you very much for listening.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Keith, for the talk. Okay, we have a few questions here. So from Mr. Ravi, what is the coverage and how many customers and which telcos or apps for credit score?
Thank you, Ravi. I think this is a very good and interesting question because we look at this as a continuous exercise. So although we do have established telco players in the market, but as a starting point, we are looking at potentially one or two telco providers in the country like Malaysia. Simultaneously, we are also embarking on the same initiative in countries like Indonesia and other markets where ADA has OpCo presence in. So at this juncture, we're looking at potentially a base of about 9 million. But as I said, this is an ongoing exercise, and we are also exploring avenues for us to work with different data partners for us to enrich this initiative. Any other question?
Is there any question? Yeah, so I got a few questions here. So what are the possible ways for BFSIs who would like to explore or adopt alternative data for credit evaluation?
Yeah, thanks, LB. I think that's a very good question. So at this juncture, I think we have already got a base model ready. But I think we are also cognizant of the fact that within the financial services industry, most of the players would already have their own proprietary credit scoring model or credit evaluation mechanisms. So with that in mind, I think we are actually enabling it from two main ways. One of which is can use the standard model that we have already built to kind of run a series of backtesting as well as POCs with the interested financial services players. At the same time, and this is particularly important to point out, that it doesn't stop there where we would just leave you with a standard model. Our science and engineering team is also available to undertake any sort of customization projects alongside with the financial services industry. So whenever there's a need for us to relook at potential harmonization of the credit scoring model, we do have team in place to work with you on that.
Yeah, another question will be from Mr. Victor Lee. What is the capital requirement for BFSI who are considering to use alternative data? And is there any other factor to be taken into consideration?
Yeah, again, once again, very good question. I think as far as capital requirement is concerned, because as I mentioned earlier, the base model is readily available. So it doesn't require any sort of re-engineering work from anyone who is interested to explore this product. But having said that, I think that in terms of capital investment, I would say we are pretty much consistent with the pricing model that's available in the market right now. At the same time, that we can also enable this service via two main channels. So one of which is the API connection that we are able to facilitate at zero cost. The other way is through a graphical user interface, like a web portal, which the banks and the interested clients can subscribe to for operational usage. So I think apart from that, I think there are also minor factors such as when it comes to API integration, it may be need for us to work very closely with the data science engineering and also the technical teams of the financial institutions to be able to harmonize the system. So I wouldn't say it's an extensive, drastic effort required for us to kind of harmonize this into the current credit rating mechanisms.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Keith. I hope it answers your question, Mr. Victor. So without further ado,
I see a question from an anonymized attendee here about free kueh and coffee. So I'll leave that to you, LV, to address that.
Yeah, all right. Unfortunately, we don't deliver any free kueh since it's MCO. Yeah, we got another question from Mr. Teh Kok Chuan. Is this credit score engine partnering with credit agency, i.e. Experience, Status, Secris?
Yeah, again, that's a good question. So at this moment, we are obviously working with a few other credit rating agencies as well to explore ways where we can, build out a partnership model on this. Because as I mentioned earlier, I think it's very important that we do not position ourselves as or this product rather to be able to replace the incumbents. So, and we never intend to do that because we see huge value and huge capability that is already available in the current credit scoring mechanisms. So how we're looking at it is that we want to deem any sort of interested party as a potential partner because I think everyone has something to bring to the table. At the end of the day, the objective is to make a more robust or create a more robust scoring mechanism that benefits the market. So to answer the question, yes, we are actively in conversations and partnering, working with the likes of Experian and CTOS.
Yep. Thanks, Keith, for your question. For your answer. I hope it answers your question, Mr. Teh. Without further ado, I will pass the floor to Angie. So,
yeah. Okay, thank you so much, LV and Keith for the wonderful insight. So hello and good morning, everyone. I'm Angie, the only lady speaker today, representing Innovative and accompanied with amazing two gentlemen. Really appreciate your presence to join our session today. So today, likewise, mentioned by Keith on the current pandemic, I will share just a quick, overview of EKYC in a nutshell, and also how ID verification and the primary risk control during this digital onboarding. So what's in the news? Next slide, please. So from recent article early this month, this article actually mentioned with a new COVID-19 variants emerging and national lockdown continuing across the banks, must seize the digital opportunity and adopt a flexible business model that absorbs the impact of changes to working practices and increased demand for digital services. So this article portrays two important keys, which is adapting to continual lockdown and a touchless experience to actually overcome the health concerns. And how do we start to adapt to this continual lockdown and touchless experience? So, and based on our expertise and our experience that we have for these past few years, we can start with a onboard customer anytime, anywhere with EKYC, and even conclude a business deals faster with digital signature, which what Hassan will share the exciting method for this later as well. Next, please. And still with the same concern, during this MCO period or after the MCO period even, we see a higher EKYC adoption during the MCO. So this is something that we witnessed, average of 279% growth in monthly prepaid SIM card activation from the EKYC channel in April when compared to SIM card activation pre-MCO in February 2019. So an average of 2.5 times of growth in electronic registration, which is becoming an essential part of digital B2C strategy for any business to support the customer onboarding 24/7 in a low-touch economy. Next, please. So what's the best EKYC and how do we rely on such technology? So here's a news reported in the previous year of deepfake technology becoming very sophisticated. Mentioned here in the news by network security expert, Professor Dr. Zuraiti Ahmad Zulkarnain said that one had to do was just search for deepfake apps and using one's internet browser. So in fact, it's becoming very common nowadays on social media. I believe you can actually see this. And you know, the expert described the increasing sophistication of deepfake as scary, as even the United States was having difficulty in how to deal with such threat. So while deepfake certainly able to bypass the liveness detection and open more risk of possible frauds, most of the digital onboarding approach do have this important component, which is a liveness detection. And some still may allow users to have an interactive video during the onboarding, which is very much open to the possible deepfake and also fraud during the registration. Next, please. So let's see a breakdown of what is the solutions that we have. So based on the two referred news, the pain points that we have seen is that adapting to continual lockdown with low touch and at the same time managing the primary risks of digital customer onboarding. So EKYC in a nutshell is electronic know your customer, is the expression used to describe the digitalizations, electronic, remote, and paperless process that minimize the cost and traditional bureaucracy in customers' onboarding process. Next, please. So in a simpler way, is allowing user to perform self-service registration without physical presence by two types of user action, scanning an ID and taking a selfie. So ultimately, what we want to achieve here is to automate the information capture with the OCR technology to ensure only genuine ID being submitted. We want to use AI to perform the security feature detections, and even without face-to-face onboarding, we are able to ensure that the person is a real-life person and also the same person as the image of an ID. So in innovative, we have a process of known as EMAS EKYC, which is a digital ID verification. So to support the EKYC process and also identity fraud management. So it's a modularized components that serve the purpose of digital ID verifications and far better ID assurance. Sorry, for better ID assurance, we have a database tracking as what mentioned by Keith in his presentation earlier. So this combinations process can be done within 2 minutes compared to a traditional onboarding, and the best practice to ensure business continuity. And at the same time, we want to measure the early risk of fraud, especially during this pandemic. So the most important thing is that there's no dependency to implement this solution. So it depends on your business model. You may just need an OCR scanning, not just ID, but any documents. We have the advantages of the technology and flexible to work around to suit the requirements. Next, please. So to break down in more details, the first step of capturing the ID will automatically extract the information on the ID into the integrated applications using OCR. So this can be extracted in just around 2 seconds for the OCR to be done. Next, please. So secondly, a silent or non-interactive based technology to perform a selfie. So this is the practice or the approach to counter the deepfake issue as what I've mentioned earlier. So a technology built on CNN, convolutional neural network, is a fundamentally different from active likeness. Thus, it requires no action by the user and is able to also prevent. So any face presented as a printed photo, still portrait displayed from the screen, a deepfake or created from a software, which is animated face or talking head or printed mask. So this approach is quite crucial because while allowing users to have the freedom to self-registrations anytime, anywhere, 24/7, so digital onboarding would definitely able to take precautions of any unwanted or bypass a mandatory requirement during the registration process. Next, please. So third, with the same image, we will also able to verify the facial features presented against the ID photo with a false match rate below 1 in a million. It's also proven to work in a multi-ethnic populations with variation skin complexions, religious practice, as what you're going to see in my next slide. So this is a real-life sample of a success face matching with the age difference between 10 to 30 years of a real taken selfie and ID submitted during the onboarding. So as a precaution of any suspicious stolen ID, this face matching allowed the business to ensure that the same person is signing up for a product is using the same ID submitted. So an AI are also well trained to even detect a facial, even on imperfect ID, as what you see on the row number 4, and able to determine the facial features of a person instead of the cosmetic looks, as what you see on the 3rd row with a look-alike looking person. Yeah, next slide, please. And the last component is a document verifications where we have a server side to perform these authentication techniques such as visual compliance. We have security feature detections, content tampering detections, and the advantages of this is no human intervention is required during this process and could save you time, almost 10 minutes per customers, even lesser. And in fact, human do mix mistakes and often unable to actually tell the genuine of an ID or a replica ID, for example. Next, please. So this is an overview of a front MiCAT, and one of our most effective module here that I would like to actually stress down is the AI capabilities to detect one of the security features in MiCAT, which is microprint detections. It's extremely effective in detecting full color replica of an ID where human may find it difficult to detect or not even knowing such security features actually available on the Malaysian MiCAT. So if you see on the image, there's actually a small wavy line of the wording of Kerajaan Malaysia that you are actually able to see on a genuine MiCAT. And this is basically the back of the MiCAT sample and the types of the landmarks detections that we have. So we have almost around 30 type of landmarks checking for a Malaysian MiCAT front and back. Next, please. So once the user has completed the EKYC journey, and automate result based on the ID and selfie submitted will be channeled back in 3 categories. So we have clear, pretty much straightforward, as the user can be on board, enjoy the features, functions from your applications almost instant or within the same day. So this is what the financial industry, especially in digital finance, is looking forward to speed up the process of user performing transactions or utilizing the app at the most efficient way without human intervention. So secondly is cautious. This is an alert of an ID being neither too good nor too bad category, which still do speed up the process of validating the ID by going through only a post-core quality request for further action by users or compliance team to actually run the necessary checking. However, as a preventive, fraud measures, third-party data resource checking can be done, as what Keith has also mentioned in his presentation earlier as well. So lastly, suspicious user is outright declined due to failure in satisfying the mandatory threshold, which help to reduce the time taken to manually validate the ID and also ensure that only a genuine customer is being on board. So next slide, please. So on the regulatory level, so Innovative supports the BNM EKYC requirements, which I will point some of the important points here. So something the customer possesses all officially valid identity documents recognized in Malaysia are supported. We have the facial biometric verifications between subject and also an ID photo, a real-time verifications through PayNext, FPX or banking networks, or here we call it Do It Now. So other than that, the most important part is EKYC also complies to the FAR performance of not more than 5%. Innovative is also certified under ISO 27000 Information Security Management Systems and accorded one of the 2 merit awards at Axiata in 2019. Next, please. So lastly, to summarize, EKYC is a trend of global digital customer onboarding. So it's becoming a market trend. So most of the digital finance benefits, especially with 24/7 customer onboarding automated by the AI with less human intervention. So we support the rising contactless economy and at the same time comply to regulatory requirements, especially during this critical period where physical touch is no longer favorable. So we also cover most of the Southeast Asia's countries, not just Malaysia. We have our presence regionally as well, especially on the Southeast Asias, and worldwide passport documents to also support on the local and also global. So yeah, next slides, please. I think that will be the end of my sharing. I hope you guys get a lot of input from today's, and we are open to have a further sharing or any opportunity that you also like to have. Then we can also suggest to you the suitable solutions that we may also benefit. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Angie, for the insightful info about EKYC and how EKYC can help business to digitally onboard their customers. Okay, so we have a question from Mr. Ravi. Hi, Mr. Ravi. Do you store the P2 data of customers in OKDB?
Okay, so for P2 in OKDB, all right. So for OK database, we are actually have few partners that we actually working with. As what you saw, Keith is one of our partners that we are working with. So we have other partners that we're also working with. We don't actually own our own database for that matter. So it actually depends on the partners that we are working with for database tracking. So we don't store any data because we don't own any database.
Yeah, thank you, Angie, for that. I hope it answers the question, Mr. Ravi. Any audience have any further question? You may leave your question in the Q&A box. And you may also scan the QR code for more information. All right, I have a question of the same same question from Mr. Ravi. You also showed Singapore and ID. Indonesia, are the same products available in Singapore and Indonesia?
Yeah, correct. So for Singapore, we do have actually our business there as well. So we do support the Singapore ID as well. So like I mentioned, we support most of the Southeast Asia's countries. But yeah, I mean, Mr. Ravi, if you would like to actually have more further details, I would definitely like to have, you know, a session with you to actually see the opportunity that we can bring in. And see what is the potential countries that you are looking at, so that, you know, we can actually advise you a more best practice. Depends on the current countries that you are looking at.
Yeah, for those who ask whether the slides can be shared, I mean the slides will be shared after the event, and of course the video recording will be uploaded in our innovative YouTube channel. You may go to our YouTube channel and then watch this video. Without further ado, I will pass the floor to Mr. Hassan for elevate efficiency and strengthen security by digitizing your sign-in procedure.
Thank you, LV. A very good morning to the participants. It's a pleasure, to be a part of this event and sharing the stage with Innovative and ADA. For our solution, basically the Signing Cloud is mostly evolving around the digital signature and giving more insights on how it can help to digitize the processes and the signing itself. Next slide, please. All right, so here we see in a conventional way where all the while we were following on the physical documents and physical signatures, and suddenly when we have this kind of pandemic, and even before pandemic, I believe we were also already in a journey on transforming onto the digital transformation. But then this pandemic has really fast-tracked this overnight. So we are scrambling, especially the businesses, including the banking and financial industries, are struggling to move towards the digital platform, and along with that, keeping aligned and complying with the corresponding or the existing compliances and policies. All right, then we come to the part wherein, what would be the best approach in terms of compliances, as well as making sure that the electronic format of signatures are as good and as valid as the physical counterpart. So we come across these standard scenarios wherein how would you be able to identify the users or the signers who are signing the documents are the actual signers. All right, and how can you make sure that the documents being transferred are safe and secure? Then come to the point wherein once the signers have signed the document, how can they make sure that they don't deny that they have signed? And finally, on the exposure of the documents itself and the information being transmitted. So to address this, a solution wherein a digital signature is very much in the mindset, wherein it leverages on the technology of PKI, the public infrastructure, which has been in the industry for many years. And the 4 key pillars or principles of PKI being integrity, which provides the proof that the document being signed and the person being signed are genuine. Authenticity, assurance that the one who is signing the document are the one who are intended to sign. Confidentiality, wherein the information cannot be viewed by unauthorized users, and only the recipients are the one who can view and sign the documents. And finally, the non-repudiation, which is also a key part, which goes on to say that the person who is signed the document cannot deny that they have not signed it. So these are all addressed by the use of this PKI technology in this digital signatures, which relies on the digital certificate, and which also fills and addresses the gaps on the digital transformation where they are, where the customers or the consumers or the financial institutions are embarking on the journey of digitization process itself. Let's go to the next slide, please. All right. And then when we talk about the legal aspect, especially when it comes to the banking industry, how can you make sure that you are complying to the legal regulations, specifically when it comes to the DSA, the line 87, when we move on to the electronic platform? Basically, if you go sign, physically, yeah, you get the stamping and you get the witnesses and so on. But if we move to the legal, to the digital platform using electronic signatures, you have to comply to certain rules and regulations. And basically, this DSA goes on to say that you have to use a certificate from a local licensed certificate authority in Malaysia. All right, which comes to like Post Digicert, Trustgate, and other tools is RAFCOM and TAP. So this gives the difficulty or a touch wherein how can the banks make sure that they comply to these regulations, as well as making sure that the digital transformation is well in line with what is required from the compliance perspective, from the legality perspective, as well as giving the convenience for all the parties involved in signing, from the customers to the bank officers and so on. Next slide. Next slide, please. So I will share you some use cases here. So one is simply connecting to your existing infrastructure for getting the document. For example, if you have a SharePoint or a Alfresco EDMS for that matter, where you can manage your documents in your repository. So the solution should be able to connect to those systems and able to upload. The signers can review, or there will be some reviewers who can review the document. And the signers, basically, there can be more than one. They can review and sign. And once the process is completed, the document can go back and sit in your infra, and then it can also be verified, means audited, like who has signed when, and can be shown in the audit trail and the process of being signed. Next slide, please. Here we see another process wherein we are issuing permits, or a receipt or an invoice, even your bank SPA or a loan agreement. So this can be applied or visualized in those kind of scenarios wherein an officer prepares a document and signs it. Then the approving officer can be a director or anyone who will approve the loan transaction or loan agreement. Then it can be dispersed to the client or to the end users. And once this has been dispersed, then there comes a part where how can you make sure that the document is genuine? Then because it's digital and somebody can print out and can alter, digital is quite hard. It's quite next to impossible. If you alter the document, the certificate will be invalid, which we will see in the sample video, in the demo video. But then the solution also should be having an option to verify the document in the digital format by the agency officers or by the users, to make sure that the document is genuine and valid. Next, we see some demo on the solution itself, on how easy and simpler it is to sign the document. Next slide, please. So before that, to address all these solutions and the gaps between electronic signature and the physical format, we have come up with a solution which is Signing Cloud, which is our own Securemetric in-house product, which is based on the PKI technology, and it allows the user to upload the document and sign anytime, anywhere, using certificates, digital certificates from the licensed certificate authority in Malaysia. This solution is available on the cloud, as well as it can be deployed on premises. Of course, if you are talking about the financial institutions, they are very concerned about the PNC documents. So this solution can be deployed on premises and comply to the corresponding bank's regulations and requirements. Next slide, please. So here we see some demo on how easy it is to sign. Can you play the video, please? All right. So this solution is web-based and also has a mobile app as well. So you can just, when the document is ready to sign, the signer can just go onto the app, log into the account, view the document, click sign, and it also gives two-factor authentication to make sure that the authenticity is maintained for non-repudiation purposes. And done. It's as simple as that. Then you can see the audit trail activity history of when the document is been signed and viewed and signed. This is the part where we see documents, the signature itself. So this is a physical part and visible, and the left side is the non-visible, where the certificates are being used to sign the document for each signatory. And this part, if suppose a document is tampered or modified, you see somebody, once the document is signed and confirmed, then somebody go and change some value of the amount or put some information, then the certificate becomes invalid, and it clearly shows that the document has tampered with. That's where you can, how it is able to protect the information and the data being used and transferred using the PADAS and the CADAS frameworks, which are internationally recognized. So this solution is following those frameworks to make sure that the document is maintaining its integrity throughout the transaction and after it's being signed. We will also show you the EKYC. Basically, we are integrating with Innovative. So we have already seen how Innovative is doing taking the capturing of the mic card and the facial. So we will show you in a live demo here how it is able to. It's seamless, So we have already integrated with EKYC. So when we are doing onboarding or registration, we'll make use of this EKYC platform to get the customer's information, and this information will also be used to issue a digital certificate from the licensee. So this integration with the licensee also has been done and handled by Sunning Cloud. So from the customer perspective, when they get the solution, they don't need to worry about the EKYC, they don't need to worry about the digital certificate, and so and so. So it's all being handled by the platform itself. Next slide, please. A bit about Psychometric. Psychometric is a local Malaysian company. Its HQ is in Malaysia. We have been in the market since 2001, and we are a listed company. We got listed in Bursa Malaysia in 2018. We have local presences in Singapore, Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, and other countries with our local partners. We are a regular award-winning company with a lot of awards we have won for solutions which we are carrying. Basically, our core business being PKI, and leveraging on PKI, we have expanded to digital signature, which is Sunning Cloud, and we also have HSMs to protect the keys and for the certificate issuance, and other solution, in-house solution being the multi-factor authentication, which is SendaGate, and mobile app protection as well. So this is a brief background of the company. Next slide, please.